Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's Saddleback webinar. My name is Liz Mangus. I'm a literacy specialist with Saddleback Educational Publishing. And as usual, we are starting our webinar just a few minutes early because we want to let you get comfortable with our platform so you know how to interact with us today. For those of you who attend our webinars on a regular basis, you may be noticing that something is a little bit different today. We have switched to Zoom webinar, and that is because you asked and we answered. One of the biggest pieces of feedback we would get from our webinar attendees was that you wanted the ability to chat and interact with each other throughout our learning time together. So we have moved to Zoom webinar so you can go ahead and chat with each other. If you are new to Zoom, what you need to know is that there is a control bar at the bottom of your web browser window, and you have two icons there. One is for chat, and one is for Q&A. So if you want to chat with your fellow attendees, go ahead and use that chat button. But if you have a question specifically for Saddleback or for our panelists today, you want to go ahead and put that in the use the Q&A icon for that. Another thing to be aware of is we will be providing resources today from our panelists. If you are looking for slides or for links or for any sorts of handouts, we will drop a link to those resources in the chat for you to access. So be on the lookout for that. And while you're waiting, why don't you go ahead to the chat area and say hello to your fellow attendees and let us know where you're joining us from. Also, while we're waiting, please follow us on social media. We know many of you are very, very active on Twitter, and you love to connect and have conversations around best practices in education. Our panelists today are very active on Twitter. So if you're not already following them, please do. We have joining us today Maria Montroni-Currais, Caterina Lazor, and Esther Park. Their Twitter handles are listed right there on the screen for you, along with ours, Saddleback. Please go ahead, grab your device, grab your phone, shout us out on Twitter, let everybody know you're joining us today for this great conversation. I'll leave this up so you can reference it while you're getting ready to tweet about us. We will start our content in about 3 minutes. Until then, let's check in with our panelists today. Hello, ladies. How are you?
Doing good.
Hey, everyone.
Excited.
So, Katarina, where are you? How's the weather? What's your summer been like?
So I'm in Alberta, Canada, and so the weather today is kind of cloudy, kind of rainy, but we are very blessed with beautiful blue skies usually in the summertime. So no snow, luckily. It fell around March, and so yeah, we're really enjoying nice weather today.
Awesome. What about you, Esther?
Yeah, so I'm in Orange County, California. The weather is 79, picture perfect weather as always. And yeah, I live in Northern Virginia, but I'm in California with my family and all. So I'm just loving the humidity-free weather right now. So I'm very
California. I'm very jealous. Humidity-free sounds great. Maria.
Yes.
I would love some humidity-free weather. I was all set up today outside on my deck. And then I was like, no, I can't talk and breathe and be outside. So I kicked my husband outside and I came inside.
Gotta be where the air conditioning is, huh?
Exactly.
So we have people joining us. I'm just gonna read out some of the locations. We have South Carolina, Oklahoma, California. Thank you everybody for joining us today. Houston, Texas. We have Georgia, Florida, Sacramento, California. Lots of people from Florida. Always love to see our friends from Florida. Massachusetts, hello, North Carolina. Please send some of that weather to Texas. Amen to that. That's what I'm saying. I'm in the Austin area, so I know exactly what that's about. All right, a lot of Texas. Okay, where are my friends from Canada? Oh, there you are. Thank you, Marcy. Marcy is joining us from Ontario. We have Jacqueline from Pittsburgh, Hi, everybody. We are so excited that you're joining us today because we have such great information to share. And this is the perfect time to have these conversations. So I'm going to, actually, it's time to get started. Glad I had my clock right there. It is 3 o'clock Eastern time. That means we are officially going to begin. And our topic today is teaching our English learners from a distance. And we want to come away from this conversation having some solid tips for planning. Now, this is difficult because the school year is right around the corner, which is very scary, especially if you're joining us from the United States right now, where there are many, many COVID-19 hotspots, and we're still waiting for our local decision makers to maybe tell us what the school year is going to look like. So with a lot of uncertainty still around us, I think what this conversation today will do is allow us to focus on what we can control, which is having a conversation with our colleagues about things that have been helpful and things that work. So our webinars typically go about 60 minutes. This one will go a little bit beyond that today, but trust me, it will be worth it. Our panelists and their information that they're going to share today span K-12. So there is something here for everybody. One last thing I want to mention. Tomorrow is when you will receive your post-webinar email. When this webinar concludes, an email will go out tomorrow, not tonight, but tomorrow, which will have the recording and all of the resources that we will share with you. And again, we'll drop a link to those resources in the chat area as we go throughout today. So with that, let's meet our panel. I already mentioned earlier, many of you are probably already familiar with these ladies, but joining us is Maria Montroni-Currais, Caterina Lazor, and Esther Park. I'm going to let them officially introduce themselves to you. We'll start with Maria. If you could just tell us once again where you are joining us from, what grades you worked with last year or for the coming year, and if you know anything and can share anything about what your school year is going to look like.
Hi everybody, I'm Maria. I live in South Jersey and it's a beautiful day here today. I am currently the brand new supervisor of curriculum and instruction for Somerdale Park School, which is in Camden County, New Jersey. But before this, I spent my career as a K-8 ESL teacher. And right now we are in the midst of developing a plan to have a plan, and I cannot share it until it's board approved.
Well, thank you. Hopefully it's board approved soon and everybody knows what they're in for this year. Katarina, what about you?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Caterina. I'm from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. So I'm in the Northwest and I'm an ESL instructional coach and middle school teacher with Elk Island Catholic Schools. And right now in Canada, the situation is pretty fluid. I was talking to the panelists yesterday and saying, it's not even a week by week decision. I feel like it's hour by hour. We're getting more information. So August 1st is the deadline for when they say we're gonna know what's happening for September. But right now, what we know is that there's 3 possible options. So we can either be online, we can be back in school, or a hybrid. So really, there's not a lot of information coming our way, but there's lots of planning. And I think this conversation today is gonna be super rich and important for some of the things we can look forward to in the next few months.
Awesome, thank you so much. Esther, what's the situation with you and your district?
Yeah, so our district is offering 2 options to all the parents and staff members. Number 1, fully online. Number 2, a hybrid model where the students will be face-to-face twice a week. So that's where we are at. By the way, I teach 9th grade English language arts. To the most precious, recently arrived students and SLIFE students with limited and interrupted formal education learners in Northern Virginia, Fairfax County. And I'm also going to be training some pre-service EFL teachers whose dream is to teach English overseas this fall. And I'm very excited for that opportunity.
Thank you so much. For those of you who are joining us in the chat, welcome. People continue to jump in. and let us know that they're here and that they're excited for all this great information today. And just for my own curiosity, if out there, if you know what's going on in your district and you want to share, I think we're all interested to hear the different models and plans that are out there. But honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if nobody had anything to share at this point because everything is still so fluid. So, all right, well, our format today is it's a panel, obviously. So each of our speakers will present some information, some tips, some resources, some takeaways from teaching their English learners from a distance this past spring that they plan to carry into the fall, should we be in a remote teaching and learning situation, which it looks like we will. We're going to begin with Maria, and Maria is going to share with us a lot of very practical, very easy to implement websites and strategies that were very impactful for her students. And if you are not aware, Maria is also the originator, or the creator of the ESL at Home document that was a viral sensation when people were looking for ESL appropriate materials to send home for their students who potentially didn't have technology. And this is the document that has been translated into numerous languages and lives on her blog. So she'll tell us a little bit about that as well. So with that, I'll let Maria take it away and share her screen and talk to us about what worked for her and her kids.
Thanks, Liz. So I'm going to get started, but I want to start by explaining to you what I'm going to talk about today. One of my passions when it comes to teaching English language learners is conversation skills and developing conversation skills. And the reason that I'm so passionate about that is because I was a language learner. I had a minor in French. I studied French all through high school and college. And when it came time for me to study abroad in Paris, I was so excited, but I was terrified of speaking to a native speaker. And it's one of the reasons I didn't continue my study of French, is because I was so nervous about saying the wrong thing, using the wrong verb tense, mispronouncing one of the accents. And what I'd love to do with my kids is show them that it's okay to make a mistake, because I never had anybody tell me that, especially when I was learning a language. So one of the things we start in my classroom every day, regardless of whether we are in school or remote, regardless of the level, and I teach K through 8, so I do this with my littles, I do this with my bigs, and we always start with some sort of conversation morning meeting, and we always include a little bit of a speaking game. So I'm going to show you a few of my very, very favorite speaking games to play with my kids. The first one is a spot the difference game, and it comes right here from the Hello Kids website. It's totally free and it's all online. And what I love about this is you can do this in the classroom on your interactive whiteboard. You can have kids do it in pairs on an iPad or a Chromebook, or if you're home and you're doing something on Zoom or Google Meet or another video conferencing platform, you can share it there and have them use their annotate tools to work on it with you. And what's great about this is they've got a lot of different characters. Some of them are relatable to kids, which makes it easier for vocabulary because they have that background development, and some of them are not. One of the fun ones we did was to work on this school in Africa, because it's not a typical American classroom setting. So as you'll see in a second when the video comes, when the picture comes up, you can see that some of the things in the vocabulary in the picture is not what my kids would be used to. And one of the reasons I love playing games like this with Spot the Difference is because there's no pointing allowed. Kids can't say, oh, it's over there, it's over there. No, they have to use that social and academic language, talking about cardinal directions, talking about positions and preposition words to explain where they found something. So that's one of my favorites, and that's from Hello Kids. And you'll get all of these links in the files that Liz shares with you. Another one comes from Highlights magazine. You might have remembered it from when you're a kid, and it is called Hidden Pictures. So I'm going to scroll down and show you. They have so many Hidden Pictures games. Some of them are shorter and not as many hidden pictures, and some of them are longer, geared towards older kids. But what I really, really like about this is the vocabulary building that comes with this. So maybe you're focusing on farm animals. This is a great way to talk about animals on the farm, or colors, again, those position words, and really getting kids comfortable with taking those speaking risks. Sometimes something I always think about when I go to introduce speaking to kids, or continue their conversation practices, we're creating a culture here. We're creating a culture of discourse, of the safe space for kids to share and not feel intimidated. Because speaking in a foreign language, in any second, third, fourth, whatever number language it is always going to be risky and always going to be hard. So my job is to make it as fun and welcoming, as safe as I can. Another fun thing, you remember this from when you were growing up, is Where's Waldo? I found this blog. It's completely free. They don't have, a huge selection, but they have a big enough selection, something you could do maybe once a week and then cycle back around. You can do it with different classes. And I love doing Where's Waldo because the kids really, really focus. And even on Zoom, that competition and camaraderie that we had in the classroom up until March came out then on Zoom, and the kids were cheering for each other, or gently heckling, as I like to say, when somebody thought they found Waldo and it wasn't Waldo. So this is a really great way also to talk about vocabulary, especially with your littles. You can ask them to point to things, and they really, really have to look and use that visual discrimination to find the sailboat, or find the woman wearing a red dress, or whatever it is that you want. And it's really, really fun and engaging for them. So another one that I like to do, and I'm sorry, I keep moving this because that Zoom thing comes up at the top. All right, here's my very, very favorite of all time classroom strategy. And it is called the 10-finger sentence. So I hope that you've got your creative juices flowing, because I'm gonna make you do it too. This website is called Pixabay, and it is kind of my go-to over Google Images, just because the pictures are generally higher quality and pretty safe. So I like this puppy. I like dogs. I have a dog. So I'm going to teach you how to do a 10-finger sentence, and then you're going to share it with me in the chat. So a 10-finger sentence is exactly what it sounds like. You're going to make a sentence about any given topic, for our case, this cute little dog, using 10 fingers. What I love about this is it's great for your low proficient learners because they're able to use the vocabulary they have. A lot of sentences for my little ones start with, I see the. That's 3 words down. Brown dog. Doing what? Swimming. Where? In the large lake. So you go ahead, come up with a 10-finger sentence. It's harder than you think. I'll give you a second, and I can't wait to check out the chat and see if you can come up with any. So let me go to the chat and let's see.
Oh, these are good. These are good.
Are they?
Yeah.
I'm trying to get to the chat. It's got that funny, that little box up there. Okay.
Okay. If I can read them too. If you can't see them, I can
That's
read them.
good. Yeah, I can't see them.
Okay. We have the puppy is swimming with its tail in the air.
I think that was 10. Very good. So that's an interesting, I heard that one had a contraction. Sometimes my kids get really, really sneaky and they try to get to 10 words by telling me a contraction is 2 words. Doesn't work. All right, read me another one.
There is a brown dog swimming happily in the lake.
I love that you used an adverb. You told me that it was swimming happily. That is exactly something that I would model for my students who are ready to use that kind of language. If I have a student who's not quite ready for an adverb, I would ask them to use a different kind of describing word, maybe a when word, maybe a where word, something else. But you can really, really have fun with 10-finger sentences. You could even eliminate the word. Give me a sentence about this picture without using the word dog.
Ooh.
And the language processing, the wheel, you will see the wheels turning in their eyes. I promise you, I've seen it. The way kids have to think to produce a sentence, but it's fun. It's all part of that gamification of classroom. And I know, Liz, you have a webinar coming up on that pretty soon, right?
We do next week, yes.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to reading. So after we would go through our morning meeting and our speaking game, we would move on to reading a book. And this would be either in class or remote. And when we were remote, obviously I didn't have my whole huge classroom library. So I had to use online books. And I love Get Epic for this because of the variety, the huge variety of books that they have at all reading levels. If you wanted to add students to your classroom, you have the capability to do that. Get Epic is 100% free for educators. Some of the books are read to me, and some of the books are read on your own, which is great because you can work on listening skills, you can work on fluency skills. One of my kids' favorite this spring was reading Jabari Jumps, which is a great book. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it. And it opened up so many discussions because it was so timely about being brave, about kids who maybe don't look like you that you might see in the neighborhood, about overcoming your fears. Because in the spring, as you know, our kids had, and they still have, all of these fears that they need to overcome. So what I love about Get Epic is you really, really just have a huge assortment of all different titles. And it's one of my hands down favorite resources. So the next resource I'm going to show you along the same lines as Get Epic is Books. But the difference with Books is that they have animated all of these books. So you can watch, one of our favorites is Click Clack Moo. So you can watch Click Clack Moo and you'll see Farmer Brown kind of move across the page and the narration is highlighted, so the words are highlighted. So again, it's great for developing fluency. You're going to do a reader's theater, which is another passion of mine. You could use that as kind of your jumping off point to listen to fluent reading. And here, Books has a lot of great examples as well. Not as many current and timely titles as Get Epic, but they do have titles that are fun, and I encourage you to check it out. The next one that I'll share is Unite for Literacy. If you are familiar with this, kudos to you, because Unite for Literacy is an amazing free site with so many nonfiction titles. And most of these titles, if not all of them, come in all different languages. I mean, to find a book that was written in Burmese, if I had this 7 years ago when I was teaching refugees from Burma and Thailand, I would have, my life would have been easier. I wouldn't have had so many nightmares, but I didn't. That is neither here nor there. So check out Unite for Literacy just for the sheer fact that you can get books written in some kids' L1s, which is, as we know, vitally important. So I mentioned my reading library. In my classroom, I have, stacks and stacks and baskets of books. So I have ABC Mouse. I bought it for my daughter because she's 4, she's in pre-K. I wanted to have some things going on at home for her that she could do while I was working. And what I realized is that the library in ABC Mouse almost mirrors the library that I have in my classroom. They've got Curious George. They've got the National Geographic readers. I keep pointing to my screen like you can see. They've got all of the Disney titles. They've got all the superhero titles that are always the ones that are the first to be picked and the first ones to get ripped up. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about because the kids are like, yeah, Iron Man. Look at all of these amazing titles. So what I love about this is even though you have to pay for ABC Mouse, you get access to all of those high interest, engaging books that the kids actually love to read when they're in your classroom. So I've talked a lot about speaking and I've talked a lot about reading, things that can work both in school, in a hybrid model, or remote. One thing that I want to share with you is what Liz mentioned before, and I know as people were introducing themselves, I saw a lot of familiar names pop up because a lot of you have emailed me, we've chatted on Facebook or on Twitter about this. This is ESL at Home. It is a project that I started in March because I quickly needed to send something home with my kids, and I knew they, A, weren't going to have a device, B, weren't going to have the access, or C, weren't going to have the parental support and supervision to either get on the device or then actually do the work that they needed to do. So I wrote out something that would work for all of my learners at all levels of proficiency and all levels of socioeconomic status, because ESL at home only requires a few things you could find around the house. We're not asking for Legos. We're not asking to count the marbles, because the kids in my building don't have Legos at home. They don't have the marbles at home, but we're asking them for crackers and things like that. And those are maybe things that they actually might have in the pantry. So ESL at home has been translated into, I believe at last count, 36 languages. Most of those languages have 12 weeks. Some of them we stopped at weeks 5 through 8. I'm hoping as the summer goes on, we can kind of get back into adding some translations. Some of you may see your names on here because all of these translations were 100% a country and statewide community effort. And I cannot thank all of you so much for your support and participation. And please share, because this is going to stay here forever and ever and ever, and it's always going to be free. So we'll always be there. And with that, Liz, I think I've covered it all. That was a lot.
It was, but we have a ton of great comments and questions. And there are actually 2 questions I would like to address now before we move on, because I think a lot of people are interested. And I'll kind of lump them together. So you taught K-8, and one of the questions was resources like the highlights or the Hello Kids. Is there something like that that works well for middle school, or did that as it stands in its current form work well for your middle school kids, or was there something else you used?
I think of Hello Kids and highlights the way I think about stickers. Kids love it no matter what age they are. And especially if you know your middle schoolers are more into a competition style thing, then I would tailor that to my kids. So if I wanted my boys versus my girls, which kids go crazy for, or if I wanted to do, I have mixed blended grades, so I might do my 5th graders versus my 6th and 7th graders. So absolutely, yes, I would say that all of these resources, when used appropriately, are appropriate for all levels.
Awesome. And then there were a couple of the resources that you shared that were paid, but you could potentially get a free subscription. And so I think Books was one that you may be able to get a free subscription, but it is generally a paid service.
Right.
And the other one was ABC Mouse. Is that right?
And I did start both Books and ABC Mouse. I did start with a free trial. Actually, I still have my free trial for Books, and I definitely will subscribe. And ABC Mouse as well. I started with a free trial, and I found that, just to have access to those books, even if my daughter wasn't using it, just to know that I have those same books in my classroom and then they're replicated at home online, for me, it's worth it.
Great, thank you so much. What about Get Epic? Is that a paid service?
No, Get Epic is 100% free for educators.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Maria. Well, I'm sure we'll circle back and we'll have more questions for you at the end. But for now, let's talk to Katarina. I love everything Maria just said about these free resources that are flexible and can be used remotely, hybrid, in person. And everybody's very, very appreciative, and they're very excited, which is great to see in the chat. And I think what's going to be great about what Katarina shares with us is we all know that for successful instruction, whether it's brick and mortar or remote, we have to have very strong relationships with our students and our families. And so what I love about what Katarina is about to share is it includes some tips for that piece of it as well. But I don't want to spoil it for you. So let's just turn it over to Katarina so she as the expert can share what worked for her.
Thanks so much, Liz. Firstly, I just want to say what an honor it is to be able to chat with these fabulous ladies today. This is by no means a perfect world of education, and I just think it's so amazing that we're continuing to show up for our students and advocate for our ELLs. And to all of you tuning in, thank you for being here, because it is a group effort. We're truly all in this together, like Maria had mentioned before. So I really wanted to start with what the research says. And what the research is saying is that if students have a higher sense of belonging, then as a result, they will have an increase in confidence and relationships, which will in turn affect an increase in language and academics. So if we think about this in terms of our English language learners, they're coming into your classroom likely with lots of issues with their sense of belonging. New country, new classroom, new language, new culture, new friends, the list goes on. And so helping them find a safe environment, a sense of belonging, is very important. And so if we think about this in distance learning, this is even more important, because we want to have our students engaged. We want to have our students continuing to show up to our classes, to have engagement. And the real key and the core of what I have found works is to really build those relationships and help students find a sense of belonging. So I want to start with some awesome ways that I decided to connect with my students. So I knew that if I continued to have a safe space for students and that connection was there, then likely we would have more engagement. So the first thing that I did was I used this platform called Talking Points. And if you haven't checked it out, you have to try it. Talking Points is an awesome tool that allows you to connect with students and families using their first language. So what happens is you type in English, whatever message you would like for them to receive, and they can receive in whichever language is their first language or most common language to them. So this was really awesome for any families with their communication barrier, with all the differences in going online, with everything that was happening where they could find information. So it was really a really awesome platform. Another thing that I said that I would never do, but I did, is I created a TikTok account. And so for those of you who don't know, TikTok is like a social media platform that allows you to post little videos. And I made it specifically about my teaching. So this was my goal was to connect with my students, and I guarantee you that 80% of your students, my middle schoolers, are on TikTok. And so it was just little videos about how to connect on Google Classroom, how to hand in an assignment, things like that. And so that's another way that I decided to connect with my students. I also have a teacher Instagram account. So my students can follow me on Instagram, and it's kind of an easier, user-friendly way for them to connect with me. Now, these are just some things that work for me. They're by no means anything that is prescribed or written in stone, but just kind of building that connection in kind of going above and beyond, making sure that they were okay was really important. Now, beyond those technological kind of things that I tried, we also were really trying to make sure that students were okay. So we did home visits, obviously from a distance, to make sure that the kids that weren't connecting were okay. Like Maria said, we also delivered packages to students that may not have had technology available to them. So we did those things to try and make sure that the connection was there. It was less about, hey, did you finish your math test? More about, hey, are you okay? That was the number one thing that we were concerned about. So the next one that I want to talk about is really making technology accessible. In this time, we can't make any assumptions that students have access to technology or even are able to use the technology that we're asking them to. So really making sure that there's multiple ways for students to get the information, to do the assessments, to engage in learning was really important. So I kind of mentioned before that we printed off resources, we delivered them to them. Maria obviously has some awesome ones that she shared. But what we really wanted to do was make sure that was presented there, that we were trying to, sorry, am I muted? It says I'm muted.
No, I can.
No, I'm good. Okay, sorry. So when technology was presented, that we were very clear about the expectations. So at every point, we were sharing our screens with students. There was very clear expectations what needed to happen. So step one, here's what you have to do. There's the visual, there's the example. And we know that visuals are very key for English language learners, especially in distance learning, to understand what the expectation is. So with any technology platform, it's very clear what needs to happen to use that technology, or very clear what the expectations are for that assignment. So just using visuals, using lots of examples, always sharing your screen, making sure that students had multiple ways to access the material was key. So the number one way that I found my students engaging in my online learning was when they had the opportunity to engage together. And being a part of conversations online was super valuable to just have that social factor. But as we know, for English language learners, this is even more of a barrier. So what I did is I tried to create opportunities for students to speak in different ways. So one of the ways that I found worked was giving students the vocabulary and conversation topics ahead of time. So they were able to see, okay, this is all the vocabulary that we're going to be talking about moving forward in this class. Here's what we're going to be discussing. Here's some sentence starters about how we can frame that language, and then here's the visual to go around with it. So if you see on the screen, here's an example of a type of graphic organizer that I would use with my students. So a way that I would frame the lesson is I would video myself, either using a platform like Screencastify or just myself in a video, and then I would upload it onto YouTube. And they would be able to use the captions and translate the captions if they would like to watch the video. Then after that, I would give them the vocabulary, the sentence starters associated with all the things that we read in that little excerpt together. Then they would have this awesome graphic organizer that they could use the vocabulary with to fill in. And then the next class, all the conversation would be around the sentence starters and the vocabulary that we talked about previously. So it was all linked together, it was all clumped together, it was all scaffolded in a way that made the learning very accessible for students. My huge goal in connecting with my English language learners was I wanted to have less comprehensible input, more output. So I wanted to have students be able to work with the material, be able to speak, have opportunities to really engage with each other. And so kind of using this platform that clumped everything together, it really helped. So the next one I want to talk about is assessment. Now, assessment was a huge gray area, obviously, in distance learning, and I just want to share what worked for me. Obviously, assessment kind of changes district to district, state to state, province to province. Obviously, I'm in a different country, but what really worked for me is to have very targeted, focused assessment. And what that meant was clumping all the outcomes together and making it very clear what the expectation was for students. So like I said before, there was step-by-step instructions, there were pictures, there were examples. I gave opportunities for students to meet with me one-on-one to, again, talk through the assessment. Let's talk about it. Let's see where you're at. Let's see how we can build that scaffold that was previously implemented into the lesson into the assessment so that everything was very clear. And then obviously at every point there was feedback given. So feedback given throughout the conversations, throughout the drafts, throughout the final product, so that there was learning taking place at every point. So the next one I want to talk about is using translating tools. So again, something that might not work for every teacher, but my huge philosophy through this was I would rather have my student contribute something, read something, write something, do something in whatever language that was, regardless of where they were in terms of their language ability. So for some students, that meant using more translating than others. Sometimes that meant using their first language versus English, or sometimes that meant really working them up to the English level. And obviously our end goal is to have them fluent in English, but in this case, where I'm not there to help every step of the way, I really wanted them to just be comprehending, to be reading, to be writing to some degree. So in most like video chat platforms like Zoom, Google Meet, they have a translator option. And if you don't know how to do that, I would recommend looking it up online or if you look on my blog, survivingteaching.ca, I have instructions on to how to do that. So that was a really helpful tool. When we were a part of the conversation, students could go in the chat box and use the translator tool for their advantage. There's also really awesome text or speech to text options. Google has a really awesome one. I know there's some awesome other tools out there. So students could speak into the app and then it would produce what they wanted to in English. Also, Read and Write Google is really awesome. And they also have a translating option for Read and Write Google. So I really allowed my students to use that as a tool if they needed to in order to meet the outcome. And then the last thing that I want to leave you guys with is that this is just such a crazy time for everybody, and just give your students space and don't overwhelm them, really give them grace, because this is something that I don't think that I could have done as a learner, and especially with our English language learners, they have so much more stacked against them. So I try to do little things to make the learning more predictable for them. So this is one of the things I did. I did a week at a glance every week. It was just very simple. You can see it's very colorful. It's very easy to read. I would send it out on Friday so that they could kind of mull it over the weekend, ask me any questions that they had, and then Monday we were all ready to go. So I was just constantly checking in. I was just constantly trying to make sure that they were okay, that they were connecting with me. That was my #1 priority. So I know that there was lots in there. I'm really just obviously trying to make sure that they had a sense of belonging, that they had that safe space, that we were continuing to build those relationships, because that was really the core of how we were going to get them to learn or acquire more language. I hope you guys have a few takeaways, and I really encourage you to connect with me more. If you want to talk to me on Twitter, my handle's @CaterinaTeach, or you want to check out my blog, survivingteaching.ca, and we can continue the conversation.
Thank you so much. We do have a few questions come in about talking points. Some districts and some schools apparently wouldn't let the staff use it because of privacy concerns or things like that. I think the answer to those inquiries is that it really is a district by district or state by state decision. But Katarina, did you have anything to add? Any things that you've heard about districts who maybe can't use that, and why, or what they could use instead?
Yeah, so it's to my understanding that the reason why some districts don't allow it to be used is because it actually texts the parent or the student. So it's kind of more of an intimate conversation. If there is barriers like that, then I recommend just using like a Google platform. Most districts, I think, use either Google or Microsoft as their communication platform. And Google and Microsoft both have awesome translator tools. You can do like a Google Hangouts or even just an email. There's lots of translator options that would have likely the same types of tools available. It just wouldn't go right to the parent or the student's mobile phone, because what I found is that even if all students didn't have a device, mostly all students, or at least all parents, had a phone, and that's why I found it to be so useful. But there are definitely other ways that you can connect and use translator tool options as your way to communicate. And like you said, Liz, I would just check with your district as to what those guidelines are, and maybe what some other options are.
Absolutely. And in the chat, for those of you who have ideas or used something like talking points or something else that worked well for you, it will be helpful if you drop that in the chat and make sure that you're responding to panelists and attendees so everybody can see your response. Thank you so much, Katerina.
Thank you.
We're going to move on now and hear from Esther, who works mostly with high school, and Esther is a Google certified educator, and she does a lot of really cool things with Google Slides. And so for that reason, I want to switch here and I want to share her slide deck with you, because it is so important to the information that she shares. So Esther, I think we're showing, yes, we are good to go.
Yes.
Slides.
Perfect.
So let me turn it over to you.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you so much for this amazing opportunity for me today, along with these amazing, passionate educators to share some of the things that I personally learned while teaching ELS from a distance. And my hope is to together brainstorm and talk about what are the best practices to help them and to serve these precious language learners for the new year. So I want everyone to chime in and share some of the strategies as I brainstorm and share as well. So as you start planning, I really encourage you to first identify and use those strategies that worked well pre-COVID in your brick and mortar classroom, and then think about how you can modify those strategies and make a shift in those strategies into a digital landscape, or even if we end up in a socially distant classroom. So what I'm going to share today are tried and true, very basic techniques that have already been supported by language learning research, which I tweaked and made like minor shifts to meet the unique needs of our learners in a distant learning setting. So my focus today is on sharing strategies and technology tools for comprehensible input, which means making a conscious effort to make these remote lessons understandable and comprehensible output, kind of like Katarina, what she shared, which means designing remote learning tasks achievable and demonstratable so that students can show learning digitally. So on the next slide, you will see an example to help you kind of visualize this language learning process. So if comprehensible input is the process of learning and acquiring new content and new language, output is the product of learning. So for example, for students to be able to understand what we say and what we present, we need to scaffold up to really transcend that added gap and barriers. The affective filter box that you see in the brain is the psychological filter that's been discussed in second language acquisition brain research that can either support or hinder language learning. So we all know from my own experience, how stressful it is to teach in front of a computer screen. And imagine how that stress increases students' affective filter and it blocks their learning. So the usual amount of scaffold that we use to make content comprehensible is not enough in a remote setting. And that's why we need to concentrate our efforts on leveling up and maximizing that comprehensible input and design low stress online activities to help them show what they learned. So, and this is exactly why the emphasis on social emotional learning and extending grace and extending love and concern for our students is so critical. So next, I want to share 6 tips, 3 that are specific to comprehensible input and 3 that focus on the output. Now, these are the first 3 strategies to make remote lessons more comprehensible. First one is providing language input with multiple representations. Next one is using speech that is appropriate to students' proficiency levels. And lastly is providing a clear explanation of online tasks. So let's look at the first one. First point. So it's super important to present new information in a variety of ways to make whatever content you teach, whether you teach English, math, science, government, or even language, to make that accessible. So I always visualize a fisherman like mending and sewing a tighter net to catch more fish. Now, I know it's a lot of work, it's time consuming, and sometimes really like cumbersome, but we have to break down those language-heavy content and use as many non-linguistic representations to help our students get it. For example, visuals, images, Bitmojis, animated GIFs, graphic organizers, and multimedia supports like video clips, virtual field trips, or even changing your virtual background on Zoom and so forth. And I noticed that these little changes we make in our instruction have a huge impact in our students' comprehension, and it gets engraved in their brain because these scaffolds really help create memorable events, very, very rich in emotions instead of just listening to a lecture. So these multiple representations will make our fishing nets tighter and really help us to catch all learners. So 2 examples I have on this slide is using animated GIF images to really enhance meaning and provide that visual support for new content or new vocabulary. And example 2 is using these animations or GIFs to introduce an abstract, confusing, language-heavy concept of main idea and details. Now, next tip I want to share is speech. I know it's very basic, but I felt that it was very crucial that I go over this, which means our verbal input and using those verbal input that's appropriate for remote setting. And with my students' permission, I want to show you a quick 1-minute video response of my beloved newcomer student and her thoughts about her distance learning experience. So watch this with us.
Hello. When I learn online, when teachers use Google Slide work or online group work, it helps me because we can work together and help us if someone can do it. And also when they use Kahoot or Quizlet Live. As an English learner, it's hard for me to understand a large paragraph or a long story, but it's better when teachers use pictures and explanations on the presentation because it's easier to understand.
So those are the 4 recaps that she mentioned. So like how she mentioned, especially in a distant learning setting, if we talk too long or too fast or use words that students don't really know, especially our level 1s or a newly arrived or SLIVE students, we're not optimizing comprehensible input. So to make sure that our speech input is understandable, we need to slow down. I'm guilty of this. We need to slow down, use frequent pauses in our speech, check frequently for understanding, enunciate clearly, and use high frequency words. And I try my best to overreact and overuse like nonverbal cues using body language, pointing, and hand gestures to support my verbal explanations. And students also really appreciate seeing the smiley faces and the teachers carrying a positive vibe and a good attitude. And I learned that that positivity transcends distance over the screen. So that's my point. Next tip is making sure that online tasks that we assign are understandable and clear. Not only our verbal input, but the online assignments and the formative and summative assessments are clear. Because else, the English learners, they need explicit instructions, meaning our instructions must be stated clearly and in detail leaving no room for confusion. And it's even harder for them to fill in those gaps in an online setting when the instructions that we give are not clear. So my one tip that I want to share, actually two tips, is giving them a step-by-step manner in smaller chunks, and also model it or share your screen with them and show them what the final product would look like so that they know exactly what each step of the task entails. Also, whenever possible, I provide their home language support to avoid any confusion that they might have. And one tech tip I want to share is this one-click Google Translate link hack that you can use. I don't think I will have enough time to go over each of the steps, but basically what this is that it gives students access to pre-written instructions in different languages using Google Translate. And it's been a game changer in my classroom. All right. So we talked about comprehensible input. Now let's talk about output. So these are 3 elements to keep in mind. Number 1, again, multiple representations, designing multiple tasks to help students show what they learn. Number 2, targeted output and focusing on what's most important. And lastly, group work. So I mentioned affective filter earlier, and this applies to the output of their learning as well. Now, I learned that I need to purposely design low stress output opportunities, especially my newly arrived students, for them to show what they learned. Now, some examples are letting students draw. I love using Pear Deck for this, or you can have them draw on a piece of paper, take a picture of it, and send it to you, okay? Also, when I asked and polled all my students at the end of last semester, what helped them learn the most, almost like 100%, 99.9% of them said games, like interactive games. They love Kahoot, Quizlet Live, WordWall, Quizalize, all of these games that are available online. Now, I learned that when my students come into my virtual classroom, they want to like interact with each other. They want to do things that we are used to doing in our physical classroom. And they're so like thirsty. They're super thirsty for social connections. So games and game-based learning strategies and tools are excellent for distance learning. If you have never tried some of these game-based learning tools that are on the screen, these are the codes that I used in my classroom that you can use later on and try on your own after our session. All right, next example is using digital manipulatives using Google Slides. I am a lover of Google Slides. So these are hands-on tasks and movable virtual pieces that really helped reduce the linguistic load from our learners, and it really helped lower that affective filter. And also these kinesthetic nature of learning really helped transfer difficult abstract concepts into more of a concrete and visible way. Now you can easily create these movable pieces in Google Slides, which is a tool that I love, not only for my presentations, but for students to apply what they learn, to practice, for me to assess their learning and so forth. Now I put a link here to my Google Slides with some of my examples that I use teaching English to newcomers. If you want to try it out and get a feel to what these moving pieces look like in Google Slides, feel free to visit these slides and this deck after this session. right? Now, next strategy is having targeted output. Now, first, I want to emphasize the fact that less is more. Now, resist the urge to go fast. Now, I still struggle with this, but slow down, check for understanding. Again, less is more. And again, to be honest, I still struggle with this, but we have to choose as educators, we need to choose wisely, especially because we're going through difficult times. I think the most difficult time of our career. We have to choose wisely. We have to prioritize and teach the most important thing at a much slower pace. Also, I always get tempted to use all these amazing technology tools that are out there and what all these Twitter people are doing. I get tempted, but my recommendation is to choose a few tools that enables you to give more opportunities for your students, and hone into those few in your toolbox and go deeper with those few. So for example, for me, Google Slides would be that tool in my toolbox. Also, it really helped me craft clear language and content objectives to prioritize and aim at what we want our students to achieve and present these objectives clearly to our students. So here's an example of my content and language objectives that I go through every session and every week. So we would read the objectives together, we annotate together, we take turns reading them in their home language. So this routine really helped, not only helped me as a teacher with having a clear target, but also helped my students. It really increased their ownership of the whole learning process and helped them really know exactly what they are going to do and what they are going to learn for that week. Lastly, the last element that I want to share, and this is my favorite, is group work and virtual collaboration. Now, we all know as language educators that collaborative learning is best practice when it comes to language learning. Now, students still need to be actively engaged in writing and reading and speaking and listening virtually. Now, I really have no idea what our school would look like in the fall, but even if we gather in face-to-face person, I imagine that we will probably need to be social distance. So I plan to use the breakout room feature of my video conferencing platform. And this way I can envision my students will be sitting socially distant, but still interact virtually through chat rooms or microphone and be engaged in that collaborative active learning without having to worry about masks or getting sick or being too close to each other and so forth. So here on the screen, you see examples of my collaborative Google Slides assignments. So all the students are in one single deck synchronously. And these moving pieces that you see here are real evidence of each of the students' voice. And it's a really safe place for them to share what they feel and what they're learning. And it's like a much needed virtual learning classroom or space. And it really helps build that class community. I also want to give a shout out to Teresa Will. She is the one that I learned all these collaborative Google Slides. She's an expert on this. So if you want to follow her on Twitter, the handle is on the screen. Lastly, it's already 4 o'clock. So lastly, I want to show you a recording of one of my live classes with high school newcomers and SLIFE students in action. So my hope is that this video gives you a practical insider's view of how to implement collaborative online work. How do you do breakout rooms? How do you do digital manipulatives in Google Slides? And hopefully this will give you an idea how to apply some of these techniques I shared into your day-to-day practice. So let's watch this together. Remember, main idea is bigger, details are smaller, right? So time to do our class work for today. Oh, it's a lot of, we have been doing this for a while and you know what to do. So this is today's work. So we're gonna do one example together and then you're gonna be in groups to finish and present your work. So this is the main idea and details chart. You're going to move the sentences and images to the correct box.
Be sure to take enough time to give directions in small chunks and model how to complete them and show the end product prior to releasing the students into their virtual groups.
Which one is the main idea? Soccer game is fun or Messi is the best? Which one is correct? Which one is the correct main idea?
Soccer game is fun.
Yes, good job. So soccer game is fun. Good job, us. You're gonna move that to the main idea box and you're finished. So after you're finished, you are going to present this to our class. All right? So let's see, we have 11 people and I'm going to group you into groups of 2. All right, so I'm going to group you in groups of 2. Let's see, I have to do this. All right, so group 1 is going to be okay, so I'm going to share the link in your chat box right now. Right, go ahead and click the link and join me in my Google Slides. There you go. I'm going to drop it one more time. And I'm going to break you out into groups. Okay, so share the microphone and talk to each other. You have around 5 minutes to finish this. Oh, you guys are so good at this now. All right. So I'm going to break you up into small groups in 3, 2, 1. Boom.
Since all the students are now in their individual breakout rooms, this is a perfect time to virtually enter their rooms to provide feedback, clarify, and intervene in a small group setting. You can also track students' progress by looking at their slides deck as it shows their movements real time.
All right, welcome back everyone. You are in the main room. You are in the main room now. All right. Okay. So for now, for the next minute, I'm going to mute you guys. Welcome back, Tomas. I'm gonna mute you. Okay. So let's quickly go over your group work, which you did a wonderful job. So group 1. So I saw some of the questions. The video, the conferencing platform that we use is Blackboard Collaborate, which has a breakout room feature. And I know that Zoom has it. Google Meet is currently working on doing the breakout room feature. Hopefully they will get it ready by the fall. So I hope these 6 tips and techniques that we discovered today together will hopefully be applied to no matter what type of setting you will be teaching this fall. And if you want to learn more in depth about some of the strategies and tools that I shared today, you can visit my website, you can connect with me on Twitter, or you can check out today's handout. All the resources will be linked there. So that's all I got. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for this opportunities of just growing and learning together.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Esther, I'm glad you were able to see the questions because I was not able to open the question window.
Oh no.
Showing your Google Slides, which is, thank you everybody for your patience as we switched over to Zoom. So this is our first webinar with Zoom. So we're still learning a little bit of the ins and outs, but I think it's gone pretty well. But thank you, Esther, for checking out those questions. I was able to, however, open up the chat, and I was noticing that there was a lot of wow, and how do I do that, and what do we use? And our audience has been great with collaborating with one another and sharing tips. Lots of how-to videos on YouTube, and definitely check out Esther's website. That's where you're going to find her slides that she shared with you today, as well as all of the other resources that she referenced throughout her presentation. We are going to, as we normally do at this time, move into the Q&A. But before we do that, we always like to tell you what is coming up for our next webinar. I think what we have established today is that games and gamification is an excellent way to engage your English learners. And if your interest was piqued by the mention of games and gamification today by our teacher panel, you'll definitely want to check us out next week. The language lady, Dr. Sandra Hemphill, will be joining us. Many of you already know her from her fantastic YouTube videos. She will be coming to share with us all kinds of information and useful practical tips for integrating games into your practice. And this will work with brick and mortar. It works remotely. I've already seen her presentation slides, and I'm super excited. I really want you guys to sign up. I think you don't want to miss it. You will receive an email prompting you to register, and you can always go to our website as well, which is sdlback.com/webinar series to register for that. So now that we've mentioned Dr. Hemphill, let's take some questions. The first question that I want to ask the panel actually came from a pre-registration. It was a pre-registration question, and it was around attendance and engagement with your English learners online. Did any of you have attendance issues? Did you experience a drop in attendance when you're in your online classes? And if so, how were you able to address that? So Maria, did you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, I absolutely experienced a drop in attendance. Well, initially, right, I experienced a drop because we lost the kids, we lost contact with them. So then I had to pick them back up one by one by reaching out on talking points. Luckily, my department in my school had an existing Facebook page for our department. So we had, posted things about the book fair, and if there was a snow day, we would post it on there. So some of my parents were used to checking that already. I was able to leverage that into doing a daily read aloud on Facebook Live. And once more parents spread the word that, I was doing that, then I was able to move us over into Zoom where we could collaborate a little bit. So it definitely took a while. We ended school on, March 17th or something. And I would say I didn't have full participation until about a month later, because it took that long for the word to get out and for people to become accustomed to this new schedule.
Esther, did you have anything you wanted to add? And then we'll wrap up with Katarina and move on to the next question.
Yeah, I think the struggle was across everyone because my attendance was very low, especially because they were dealing with family issues. A lot of them were working full-time. Technology skills were not there. So I decided to call them and text them. I used my Google number to get me connected to WeChat, because everyone has WeChat. So I started just texting them individually instead of group chat. I think it was very beneficial that I took the time to check on a student instead of getting the group message out, just letting them know that I'm thinking of you. Even if you don't come to my online classes, I still care about you, not only your academics, but your life in general. So it was very important knowing my students by name and letting them that I care. And it was more of an opportunity, a learning curve for me to start really taking care of them as a whole and I started building more family connections using WeChat and reaching out a little more. And I know we still struggled with online attendance still, but I felt like for me as a teacher, I learned that that is the most important and crucial part of my job is to, you know, stay connected and to really show them that I care. Yes.
Thank you. Katerina?
Yeah, and I guess I'll just build on what both of these ladies said. I think that it's important to remember that parents are such an important stakeholder in education, and engaging the family, I think, made such a difference in the attendance of all students. So that's a really important point that we can't forget. And then, like Esther said, I think just making individual connections is so important. The mass emails or the blanket statements didn't really connect with the kids that needed the connection the most. So doing whatever you had to do to make sure that that student knew that you missed them, that that you noticed that they weren't there that day, that there was things that you wanted them to do just for you, whether that was academic or non-academic. I think that that's super important. And then sometimes it was even that the student didn't feel comfortable in an online Zoom setting. So then one-on-one meetings happened with me, or that's when we did smaller group activities, things like that, to just kind of alleviate some of the pressure, because I also think that there is heightened anxiety, especially in our ELLs, when we have to be in a computer setting and they have to speak English. So I just think creating that atmosphere that allows for a more safe environment to the best that you can really will help.
So much. I wanted to take a minute before we move on to the next question to just address that we had several people write in and ask about assessing remotely, and particularly about WIDA, and a few people in Texas were asking about TELPAS, some of the big tests that we give here in the United States for placement and exiting English learner programs. People were having questions about what that will look like remotely. And so I wanted to mention that there are no definitive answers from what we could tell, but I did link in your resource folder. We dropped the link in the chat several times. I did link on that resource document the latest information that was available. I'm not sure it's a satisfactory answer, but it's the information that is currently available. So for those of you who have that question on your mind, you can reference the links in the resource document. This is a great question, actually. It comes from Catherine, and she wants to know if the panelists, do you work with your English learners separately? Do you have your own class? Because the situation she was in was as support for a general ed classroom. And it was very difficult to figure out how to best support students in as like a general ed push-in sort of instructor. So do any of the panelists work in general ed classrooms as well, or are you fortunate enough to have your own time with the students? And what are your thoughts around that? Anybody can chime in if they have any ideas.
Yeah, oh, sorry, Maria, go ahead.
Just wanted to say I'm full pullout because of my small school. We need to merge grades, so there's no way for me to push in without leaving kids out. So I need to pull them out to my own room so I can merge the grades. So unfortunately, I can't speak to that.
Okay, thank you.
I was just going to say that I kind of have a hybrid role, I guess. So as a ESL instructional coach, I do pull out, and I do also do push in. So what that means is I will go and co-teach with teachers, or model different strategies, or assist with specific lessons, whatever that means. And so there is kind of like multi-layers to my role. However, in a distance learning setting, I just had them in kind of my own class, just because it was difficult to kind of co-teach in a kind of collaborative type setting when asynchronous teaching was already so new for people. So I just created my own Google Classroom and had kind of my own teaching times with the students that I would usually do pullout with. So that co-teaching element, although it was still present, wasn't as prevalent in distance learning.
Esther, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I'm fortunate enough to have all sheltered level, very one level classes this year. Last year, I co-taught with an English, 8th grade English teacher. And I think just collaborating with the English department and letting them hear about our English learners' needs and being involved in the CLTs is very crucial. Just advocating for our learners and letting them know that, you know what, we need to scaffold and we need to better help students and help them learn the best. So just communication, collaboration, I think that would be key.
Thank you. There's a bit of a technical question here for Esther on when a single student does manipulatives in Google Slides, doesn't it change the slides for every other student, like in collaborative, or did you do individual?
It does. So it's up to you. Sometimes for asynchronous learn, well, sometimes I assign different copies of the Google Slides, but my students enjoy doing a collaborative Google Slides in one single class deck. And I would assign group 1 to go to page slide number 10. Group 2, you are in charge of page number 11. So they can actually own one of the pages of the class deck, and they would do they would move things and manipulate things real time.
Thank you. We have several questions around any ideas off the top of your head for if you're starting the year remotely with a new class of students, how you might go about trying to build those relationships to start off the year on the right foot. Did anybody want to speak to that?
I would say focus on SEL as much as you can. In my district, one of the things that we are pushing content instruction back until nearly October, because we know that the kids are going, well, we start Labor Day. So, you know, if you start in August, that would be different. But we know that, you know, kids are coming in with all sorts of baggage and emotional trauma and possibly physical trauma that we don't know about. So we are going to just meet them where they are and reconnect with them and really, really build up the community aspect. And like I mentioned, you know, for me, it's all about creating a culture and a safe space. So we're really going to push creating the safe space as much as we can, whether we are remote or in person.
Thank you. Any other ideas? Maria just covered it, huh?
Maria nailed it on the head for sure. I think other kind of cool ways to engage that SEL would be to use games. I think that that's a really great way to build community. Usually in a normal class setting, like Esther was saying, try and kind of use what you know and use what you work with before. And I would usually do icebreakers or things that would help students get to know each other and feel more comfortable in the setting. And so trying to do things like that in a distance learning setting, I think is totally possible. It just looks different. And Maria shared a lot of awesome games, same with Esther today. And so that's a really great starting point, just to try to create that community environment.
I love that. Thank you so much, Katarina. And that allows me an opportunity to give another plug for next week's webinar. If you're looking for different game and gamification ideas, I think you will be very pleased. So I definitely encourage you to check that out. We are approaching 1 hour and 15 minutes. So I'm going to wrap up for today. But I did want to thank Katarina because we did have a question around TikTok, if anybody used TikTok, and you did share that you do use TikTok. I actually would like to know, anybody out there, if you can drop in the chat, do you consider yourself a TikTok expert? Because I'm just putting feelers out there, but I think a TikTok webinar would be a good idea. So if you consider yourself a TikTok expert and have ideas to share and can help me put together a webinar for educators around TikTok, let me know in the chat, and who knows, maybe we'll put something together. I don't know. I'm always looking for new webinar ideas. Okay, thank you so much to our panel. Excellent job, great ideas. I know our audience is just thrilled with this content and everything that you had to share. And I expect that the conversation on Twitter will continue after we close out today. You can find Saddleback on Twitter. You can find us on Facebook, Pinterest. You can find us on any and all of your favorite social media sites. Email contact@sdlback.com. Find us on the web, sdlback.com, to check out our high-low books and the rest of our webinar series, etc. So thank you once again for all that you do, and just remember, we're all in this together. We're all in the same boat, and focusing on collaboration and good ideas for good instruction is the way to approach all of this uncertainty. So we appreciate you. Thank you, everybody. I see everybody in the chat saying how much they love this. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. We hope to see you for our next webinar, and have a great day, everyone.